Have you ever had the feeling of coming home, but not feeling at home inside yourself? I survived the war, but inside, it felt like I was still there. Every step I took on the silent city streets reminded me of the sounds I wanted to forget. Every look from my family brought a question I couldn't answer. Are you okay? And the truth is, not even I knew. The body returned, but the soul remained there, in some corner of dust and smoke, where time stood still. I tried to smile in the photos, sit at the table for Sunday dinner, listen to conversations about normal things, but inside me there was a battlefield that no one saw. And how can I explain this without scaring people? How can I say that sometimes the greatest fear is not the sound of the gunshots, but the silence after them? Maybe you've never been to war, but have you ever felt that way? Like you were physically present but emotionally distant from everything? Like the world around you kept going, and you stopped somewhere along the way? Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover may surprise you, and maybe even heal you from within. For years I hid, literally and emotionally. I hid behind short answers, polite smiles, phrases like, "I'm fine, just tired." I even hid from God, as if He didn't know exactly where I was, as if He couldn't see through the walls I had built for myself. And you know what's hardest? It's that on the outside everything seemed normal. Apparently I was living, I had a house, food, people around me, but inside, it was like living in ruins. And if you've made it this far in this video, maybe you've felt something similar at some point in your life. Maybe it wasn't the war, but it was a loss, a trauma, a pain that no one saw, invisible scars. These are the hardest to explain, because they don't bleed, they don't leave visible marks on the body, but they eat away at you from the inside, little by little, and you learn to get used to the pain, as if it were normal to carry this weight every day. You learn to walk crookedly, to breathe slowly, to survive in silence. That's why this story needs to be told, not as a drama, but as a cry that has been suppressed for years, because there are many people out there, maybe even you, who are still hiding, who still believe that no one would understand, that no one would listen. But what if I told you that it was precisely in this silence that God found me? It wasn't in the temple, nor in big events, nor in beautiful speeches. It was in an ordinary morning, in a dark room, when I no longer knew what to ask for. And there, without words, without strength, and without masks, something began to change. And that's exactly where this story really begins. Because what comes next, you need to hear it. Something started to change, not in a grand way, not with a light from the sky or with a voice that echoed off the walls, but with a silent, almost imperceptible presence that invaded my inner chaos with something I had forgotten what it was like. Peace. True peace. The kind that doesn't need an explanation. And there, for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to breathe without fear. I allowed myself to exist even though I was broken, even though I was confused, even though I was still carrying everything I didn't know how to let go of. Maybe you're also trying to carry something that weighs more than it should. Maybe you've learned to hide your pain so well that you no longer know how to show it. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that healing begins the moment we decide to stop pretending, the moment we allow ourselves to be seen or heard. And that's why, if this topic resonates with you, leave a comment below with what has touched you the most so far. It could be a memory, a pain you've never been able to put into words, or just an "I understand." What you share could be exactly what someone needs to read today, to not feel so alone in this invisible battle. Here, each comment is like a beacon. It illuminates, welcomes, and connects. And if this content made you feel something, no matter how small, click the like button. It may seem like just a click, but it shows that this message needs to continue, that stories like this have value, that giving voice to these scars is important. Oh, and if you believe the world needs to hear more truths like this, with respect, empathy, and depth, subscribe to the channel. This is how this community grows. This is how we continue to bring stories that heal, that touch, and that make us look at others with more compassion. Your participation here is what makes this space exist, what transforms this video into something alive, pulsating, real. Because we are not alone, and the more we share, the more healing finds its way. And it was exactly on this path, as silent as it was transformative, that something inside me began to awaken. The strangest thing was realizing that the world had moved on, and I hadn't. While everyone around me was talking about plans, work, birthdays, and new beginnings, I was still stuck in a specific point in time, as if my soul had been trapped in that moment when I heard the last gunshot, or the moment I said goodbye to someone without knowing if I would return. The clock of life was ticking, but inside me it was as if I was frozen. Breakfast was silent, but not in a calm way. It was the silence of disconnection. My eyes were there, looking at the bread, the newspaper, the faces, but I was miles away. Every sound in the background could be a trigger. A horn was mistaken for a siren, a plate falling to the floor for an explosion, and no one noticed, because on the outside, everything was normal. And that's exactly what makes everything so confusing. Invisible scars create a kind of suffering that cannot be shown. And then another kind of war begins, the one waged with your own conscience. You start to wonder if you're exaggerating, if you should be better by now, if the problem is within you. And deep down, this doubt eats away at you. The guilt for still feeling afraid, for not being able to laugh lightly, for not fitting in with family or friends' conversations. Everything seems superficial when you've already faced the depths of the abyss. How can you laugh at simple jokes again when you've seen someone's eyes go blank? This disconnection wasn't just with the world around me. It was with myself too. I no longer recognized myself. My old dreams, desires, goals, they all seemed like something from another life. I no longer knew what I liked, what I wanted, what was good for me. When the soul is in combat for too long, it forgets how to rest. Peace begins to seem strange. You become suspicious of silence, as if it were hiding something that's about to explode. And that's when we start to hide. First from others, then from ourselves. You avoid meetings, invitations, questions. You become someone who knows how to keep quiet like no one else. Someone who smiles without showing their eyes. Someone who is always tired, always with too much on their mind. The hidden truth is that it's not just the body that comes back hurt. The soul comes back carrying too much weight and with no place to unload it. Many people talk about the war, but few talk about what comes after. About the behind-the-scenes recovery, which has no medals or applause. About the night when you wake up in a cold sweat from a nightmare that seems real. About the moment when you realize that you no longer know how to ask for help, that you have even lost the emotional vocabulary to express what you feel, that you are learning to survive again, only now on an invisible battlefield. Transformation, in these cases, doesn't come with a bang. It starts slowly, with small permissions, like allowing yourself to feel without judging yourself, allowing yourself to remember without punishing yourself, allowing yourself to fail, even after having already won so many external battles. It's at this point that the journey changes, when we realize that it's no longer about fighting outside, but rather about learning to exist inside. And when we find someone who understands, someone who has already experienced the same kind of suffocating silence, it's like a new kind of air enters our lungs, an air that brings relief, that doesn't demand, doesn't force, just welcomes. That's why, little by little, I began to allow this place of pain to also be a place of new beginnings. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject. Comment here. I'm on this journey too. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because one thing is certain. No one teaches you how to come back. There is training to leave, to fight, to resist, but no one prepares your mind for what happens next. No one gives you a manual on how to smile when everything still hurts. So you improvise. You mold yourself to what is expected of you. And the scariest thing is realizing how quickly you learn to pretend. You learn to smile at the right moment, to say it's okay without even thinking. You learn to live as if you were whole, while inside you are falling apart in silence. It's like playing a role every day in a real-life theater. You wake up, put on your clothes, adjust your tone of voice and adjust your gaze to seem present, but maintain an invisible distance from everything, because being real requires courage, and sometimes we simply don't have it anymore. Not at that moment. The daily effort to look good is tiring. It's so tiring that some days the simple act of getting out of bed already feels like a mission. How many times have you smiled on the outside while something screamed on the inside? How many times has someone praised you for your strength and you swallowed hard, knowing that it wasn't strength, it was disguised exhaustion? And yet, we carry on, because we've learned that showing pain is weakness, that being vulnerable is scary, that feeling too much is inconvenient. So the mask becomes a protection, but it also becomes a prison. The hidden truth is that most people who seem to be doing well are just surviving, each one with their own ghosts, traumas, unresolved fears, and perhaps society's biggest mistake is to measure suffering by what is visible, because no one sees the emotional weight of a memory, the silent impact of an absence, or the mental battle of maintaining sanity when everything around seems like a distant noise. And the most curious and painful thing is realizing that the mask works. People really believe it. You go to the market, greet your neighbor, do your job, and no one notices. You learn to deliver results even when you're broke. To talk about trivial things even when your chest is buried in things that no one would understand. And somehow this makes you admirable to outsiders. But deep down, you know that you're just pushing through the days with your stomach. There is a deeply rooted mentality in our culture that pain needs to be hidden in order to be overcome. But what if it is the other way around? What if the cure lies in stopping pretending, in accepting that there are days when it is not possible, when the weight of the situation overcomes you, when silence screams louder than any words? This change in perspective is what opens the space for true transformation. We were not made to carry everything alone, and recognizing this does not diminish anyone. On the contrary, it is in this recognition that real courage lies. The courage to be honest about one's own pain. The courage to allow oneself to break so that one can rebuild with more truth, without armor, without disguises, only with what is. And when we start to take off these masks, even if slowly, it's like a new breath of air enters. A light relief, almost imperceptible, but liberating. We start to realize that there is beauty in sincerity, even if it comes full of cracks. Because each crack shows that you're still alive, that despite everything you're still trying, and there is no greater honor than to continue, even when hurt, not out of stubbornness, but out of purpose. Because at some point on this journey you begin to understand that living is not pretending to be okay. Living is feeling. It is going through pain with awareness. It is looking fear in the eye and still taking one more step. Comment here. That makes sense to me. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because there is a type of pain that is not shown, not for lack of will, but for fear. Fear of judgment, fear of being labeled, fear of appearing weak, fear that if someone really saw what is happening inside, they would turn their face away. And so many times we choose to hide, sometimes at work, sometimes in daily commitments, sometimes even in versions of ourselves that we construct just to seem acceptable. But what no one sees is the silent effort it takes. Hiding your pain is a full-time job. You think before you speak, you calculate every word. You even control the tone of your laugh so it doesn't seem exaggerated or too forced. You avoid meetings. You don't reply to messages. You pretend you forgot birthdays. Little by little, you disappear from people's lives. And at the same time, you disappear from yourself. There comes a time when you no longer know what is real. The image you project to the world is so far from what you feel that you start to lose yourself inside. And the worst part is that this seems like the best way out, because you even try to open up once or twice, but you soon notice that disguised discomfort in the other person's eyes, as if your pain were inconvenient, as if what is tearing you apart inside was too small for those on the outside. And then comes the shame, a shame that has no face, but weighs heavily, a feeling that you should be stronger, more determined, more at peace, a silent demand that echoes every morning every time you try to start the day with some hope, but already feel the weight of your own mind pulling you down. It is at this point that many give up trying. But what few people say, and what I had to live to discover, is that there is power in recognizing weakness, that admitting that everything is not okay is not sinking. It is opening space to find yourself again. Because while you hide, the pain grows in the darkness. But when you start to name it, to talk about it, to understand it, it starts to lose control over you. And this doesn't happen all at once. It's a process of reconstruction that goes through each broken piece. A look, a gesture, a memory. Everything becomes raw material to understand who you are now. Because yes, you've changed, and there's no way to go back to who you were before the pain. But it's possible to be someone new, someone who bears scars, but who has learned to walk with them without bending. Those invisible scars that you tried to hide for so long are actually part of your story. They tell of what you endured, what you faced in silence, what you went through when no one was watching. And they don't need to be a reason to be ashamed, they need to be seen with dignity, because each one of them is a testament to the fact that you didn't give up. The hidden truth is that the more we try to appear invulnerable, the further we move away from healing. Because healing doesn't happen in performance, it happens in truth. And the truth can be uncomfortable, yes. It can bring tears, tremors, long silences, but it is in this territory that transformation is born. When we stop hiding even from ourselves and begin to walk honestly, even without all the answers. The decision to stop hiding doesn't happen in a single moment. It happens in small everyday choices, like looking in the mirror with kindness, like allowing someone to get close to you, like saying, "I'm not feeling well today," without fear of what people will think. It's these discrete decisions that gradually rebuild the identity that pain tried to erase. And in the process, you realize that being seen, truly seen, is an act of courage, because those who see you without masks also reach out to you with love. And it's this kind of connection that heals, that transforms, that sustains you on days when everything seems too heavy. It's not about going back to who you were. It's about accepting who you are becoming, with all the imperfections, all the flaws, all the slow steps. Write it down. I'm allowing myself to be seen. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because there comes a point in the journey where even silence becomes too loud. A point where you're not just tired, you're exhausted. From the soul, from the weight, from the failed attempts to feel alive inside. It's like you're standing there, surrounded by people, but with the feeling that no one really sees you. And when no one sees, the pain seems to grow more freely. I remember nights when the clock seemed frozen. Sleep wouldn't come, and all I wanted was a little rest. Not just for my body, but for my mind, for my memories, for the thoughts that seemed to scream when everything outside was silent. There was something cruel about the fact that, just as the world was resting, my inner war began. It wasn't just insomnia. It was anguish, a kind of tightness that couldn't be explained, as if every heartbeat was saying, "You don't belong here anymore." And when that feeling starts to happen again, day after day, it undermines your faith in yourself, your faith in others, your faith in something bigger. And I never thought I would find myself in this place. I always had a strong foundation. I always believed that my inner strength would sustain me. But there, in that dark room, in that oppressive silence, it seemed like even God had walked away, and I found myself asking questions that I never had the courage to say out loud. Why am I still here? Would anyone miss me if I disappeared? Is there really a purpose to this pain? That was the bottom, not the visible bottom. Because on the outside I still did tasks, still answered messages, still showed up when needed. But on the inside, I was in free fall. I no longer prayed like I used to. Not because I stopped believing, but because the pain was so thick that words wouldn't come out, as if every attempt to talk to God came back as an empty echo. And it is in these moments that we understand what real vulnerability is, because there is no more mask, no more strength of appearance, no more ready-made speech, just you, broken, trying to understand where everything went wrong. And the cruelest thing is that in these moments the world does not stop. People continue to laugh, work, dream. And you wonder if you will ever feel something like that again. It's hard to admit, but yes, I thought about giving up. And maybe you've thought about it too. And that doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. Because there are pains that go beyond the limits of what is considered bearable. There are silences that weigh like screams. And there are times when all you wanted was a sign. Something that said, "You are not alone." But the sign didn't come as a miracle. There were no lights or voices from heaven. It came almost imperceptibly. In an unexpected hug, in a song that played by accident, in a message from someone who didn't even know what you were going through. They were small gestures that, added together, began to remind me of something I had forgotten, that being broken doesn't mean being finished. And that's when the turning point began. Not an immediate change, but a shift in mindset. I began to realize that rock bottom wasn't the end. It was the place where I finally stopped running from myself, where I had to face all the parts of my story that I had tried to hide even from God, where I understood that He hadn't abandoned me. I was the one who had walked away because I didn't think I deserved to be found anymore. This was the hardest revelation for me to accept, that even at my worst, even when I felt dirty, lost, broken, there was still a gaze upon me, a gaze that saw it all and still loved me, a gaze that didn't demand strength from me, but offered me rest. That didn't demand answers, just presence. From then on, everything started to take on a different tone. There was still pain, of course, but now it was no longer a sentence, it was part of the journey. I began to understand that perhaps faith was not the absence of falling, but the decision to keep getting up, even without understanding everything. And that changes everything. Because when you stop waiting for faith to get you out of the valley and start to realize that it is faith that sustains you from there, then you begin to transform. Write it down. I'm still standing. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because it was precisely when I stopped expecting ready-made answers that something different happened. It wasn't in a brightly lit service, nor in a public prayer, nor during a powerful speech. It happened at a time when I no longer expected anything. I was on the floor, literally and emotionally. The house was silent. The night was far gone. The tiredness greater than my body, greater than my soul. I sat leaning against the wall of my room without the strength to cry, without the will to fight. I didn't say anything. I just stayed there, quiet, broken, empty. And it was in this dense, almost suffocating silence that something unexpected began to happen. I can't explain it exactly. It wasn't a voice you hear with your ears, but with your heart. It was as if, after all the internal noise that had been with me for months, a presence had entered, calm, firm, without fanfare. And it didn't come with accusations. It didn't tell me I was wrong. It didn't ask for explanations. It didn't tell me to get up. It simply stayed. And the only certainty I had at that moment was, I was no longer alone. The truth is that it was in the silence that he found me. Not in the comfortable silence, but in that desperate silence, where the soul screams without sound. And he didn't find me clean, nor organized, nor ready. He found me in pieces at the bottom of the well, between memories that I wanted to forget and guilt that I no longer knew how to carry. And even so, he looked at me as if to say, I know, and even so, you are still mine. It was that kind of love that broke down all my defenses, because I had spent too much time trying to be strong so that I would deserve attention, trying to look good so that no one would worry, trying to maintain the appearance of being in control. But he didn't want my strength. He wanted my truth. And in that moment, my truth was simple. I was tired. And the most incredible thing is that it wasn't a visible miracle that transformed me. It was the realization that God doesn't walk away from pain. He enters it. He doesn't wait for us to get ready before showing up. He comes into the middle of the mess, sits down next to us, and stays. And that staying has a huge impact. Because when you feel seen exactly as you are, and still loved, something changes inside. The transformation begins there, in a moment that seems small, but that carries a gigantic meaning, because it changes your mentality. It changes the way you look at yourself. It changes the weight of guilt. Because if God can love me even with everything he knows about me, then maybe I can start loving myself too, even without understanding everything, even when I'm still broken. And it was from then on that little by little, I began to find meaning in simple things again. A hot coffee in the morning stopped being just a routine. It became a gift. The sound of the wind, once so frightening, began to sound like company. A short walk became a new beginning. And not because the pain went away, but because now, I no longer carried everything alone. This experience didn't erase what happened. It didn't rewrite my story, but it gave it new meaning. Because when God meets you in silence, he doesn't come to make you forget the pain. He comes to walk with you through it. And that changes everything. Because it's no longer about winning or losing the battle. It's about moving forward, even when you're hurt. It's about having a purpose greater than the pain. And maybe you've already experienced something similar. Or maybe you're still in this silence, trying to understand if someone still sees you, if there's still a way out, if it's worth believing again. I don't have all the answers, but I can tell you the truth. When everything seems lost, that's when something new can begin. Because sometimes you need to empty yourself completely in order to be filled with something that truly makes sense. Write it down. I was found in the silence. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject. Because after his presence found me in that heavy silence, it wasn't as if everything magically fell back into place. There wasn't a button that made me forget what I had experienced, nor a sharp cut that separated the before and after. It was different. It was slow. It was human. It was step by step, scar by scar. I began to realize that being back on my feet wasn't a literal return. It was more of an internal reconstruction, a relearning how to move from within, even with the pieces still fragile. There were days when I woke up and felt lighter, and there were others when I could only sit in bed and take a deep breath, and that was already progress. We grow up believing that progress needs to be visible, fast, full of milestones. But in reality, some of the greatest victories happen in the invisible. It was necessary to learn to honor each small step. Wash your face calmly. Eat a whole meal. Call someone and say, "I thought of you today." Things that seemed simple before now had weight and value. And in this new rhythm, God was showing us that the past would not be erased, but could be given new meaning. Little by little, the scars began to tell another story. No longer the story of those who were lost, but of those who survived. Of those who fell and were afraid, but still got up. Of those who bled, but never stopped breathing. And this transformation did not come from denying what I had experienced, but from the decision to not allow it to define me forever. Because there is a huge difference between carrying a scar and living trapped by it. This journey taught me a lot about mindset, about how everything starts with the way you decide to see yourself. For a long time, I only saw flaws. I only saw pain, mistakes, trauma, but there was a hidden truth. Within that chaos, there was also courage. There was someone who, even without strength, kept going. And when God started showing me this, not as a demand, but as a revelation, something inside me started to change. It wasn't easy, because starting over hurts. You need to confront what you've avoided for so long. You need to look in the mirror and admit what still scares you, what still holds you back, what still hurts. And you need to do it slowly, without blaming yourself for the slowness of the process. The impact of this is profound. You begin to understand that healing is not a destination, but a daily decision. And even in relapses, because yes, they do happen, there is something valuable, the opportunity to choose again, to not give in to the cycle, to say, "Today was difficult, but I'm still here." And that phrase alone is powerful, because it shows that you understood the true meaning of continuing, not as someone who pretends to be fine, but as someone who chooses to exist with truth. Behind the scenes of this reconstruction, I also discovered that God is in no hurry. He respects our time, our pain, our rhythm. And the most beautiful thing about all this is realizing that He walks with us, even on days when we feel nothing. Even when everything still seems gray, even when silence returns, He is still there. This constancy sustained me, knowing that I didn't need to prove myself. I didn't need to rush. I didn't need to be ready. I just needed to keep going. One step, one thought, one breath. Sometimes that's what faith becomes. The simple act of breathing and trusting that even without understanding the next step, I'm not walking alone. And so it was. Without any big announcements, without any applause, without any visible achievements, that I began to return, not to an old life, but to a new way of living, with more awareness, more lightness, more presence, with more faith in the process than in the rush for results, with the certainty that each scar I carry today does not embarrass me, it teaches me. Write it down. Every step matters. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because after so much time hiding, trying not to be seen, something inside me changed. And it wasn't because the pain disappeared or because life magically organized itself. It was because, for the first time in a long time, I understood that everything I had experienced didn't need to be buried. It could be used, not as a weight that ties me to the past, but as an instrument that shows paths to those who are still stuck in the same place where I once was. It was there, in that silent turning point, that a new mission began to emerge. It didn't come with titles, or applause, or a clear feeling of, now everything makes sense. It was more like a slight, almost imperceptible intuition that perhaps I hadn't gone through all that by chance. Perhaps in some way that I didn't yet understand, my pain could serve as a bridge. It came in the simple act of truly listening to someone, of noticing in another person's eyes the same pain that had once accompanied me. And instead of retreating, I stayed. I stayed as someone who doesn't have all the answers but knows the territory of pain well. Someone who doesn't speak from above but from the same ground. The impact of this was much greater than I expected, because the hidden truth is that when you decide to show your scars, you free other people from the shame of theirs. You open a chink in the other person's armor, without invading, without forcing, just by existing truthfully. And sometimes, that's all someone needs. To know that they're not alone in this silent war. To know that there's someone who understands not only what's being said, but what's never been put into words. I started seeing this happen almost unexpectedly. Someone would send me a message saying, "And I don't know why, but I felt comfortable talking to you. And all it took was an honest conversation, and I understand, and I've been there too," for that person to allow themselves to breathe. It's in these backstage areas of life, away from the spotlight, that the most profound transformations happen. And it's not about grand speeches or about bringing quick solutions. It's about presence. It's about saying with life, I know what it's like, and I'm here. This mission has no script, no strategy. It's just presence. It's just listening. It's just truth. And the most beautiful thing of all is that, while I reached out to others, something inside me was also being healed. Because helping someone get up reminds you of everything that kept you standing. It reaffirms the strength you built on the hardest days. It shows that nothing you experienced was in vain. I won't romanticize it. Sometimes it still hurts to remember. Sometimes revisiting certain parts of my history brings back feelings that I'd rather forget. There are days when memories come back with force, catching me off guard and making my chest heavy. But now, each memory comes with a purpose. Because I know what it's like to be at the bottom and think that you'll never get back up. And if today I can use this memory as a bridge instead of a prison, then it serves something greater than myself. This new mission is not about saving anyone. It's about walking together. It's about being there, not as a hero but as someone who understands the process. Someone who knows that healing is not a straight line, that relapses exist, that shame needs light to lose its strength. And that's why I keep going. Not because I'm 100% ready, but because I understand that waiting to be ready is an illusion. Healing happens along the way, in the exchange, in the surrender. Many people hide in fear of being weak, of appearing broken, of scaring others with the intensity of their feelings. But when you see someone who has been through all of this, and is still here, still speaking out, still reaching out, you begin to believe that maybe you can do it too, that maybe you deserve to be seen, to be cared for, to be heard, not as someone who bothers, but as someone who matters, as someone who carries a story that is worth telling, even if it takes time, even if it brings tears. And this is one of the most profound revelations of this journey, realizing that what you thought was destroying you may be what connects you, that what you thought you needed to hide may be exactly what gives you emotional authority, not an authority that imposes, but one that welcomes, that says, I know this place, and I can walk with you until you get out of it. This authority does not come from diplomas or theories. It comes from the pain faced, the darkness traversed, the choice to continue even without any certainty. That's why my mission today is different. It's not about doing big things. It's about doing simple things with intention. It's about seeing who's next to you, genuinely asking how they are, offering your presence when everything else seems to fail. Because in the end, what transforms is not eloquence. It's empathy. It's the look that says, I see you. It's the silence that welcomes without rushing. It's the hug that says you don't have to pretend here. And that changes everything. It changes the way you look at yourself, how you position yourself in the world, how you understand your own story. Because you stop being just someone who suffered and become someone who carries meaning, someone who saw pain up close and still decided to love, someone who was touched by grace and now lives to spread it, not as an obligation, but as someone who found in their own new beginning the reason to live with more purpose. Because now, every scar has a voice, and every step I take carries the memory of who I was and the hope of who I am becoming. Write it down. My pain has purpose. Because if everything I'm saying echoes inside you, even if silently, then this story isn't just mine. It's yours too. And no matter where you are right now, whether you're on the surface trying to look good or you're at rock bottom feeling like you can't get out, the truth is that you're not alone. And this isn't just a phrase to comfort you. It's a reminder, a breath of fresh air, a sign. Because maybe the simple fact that you're here now, listening to this, is already a kind of answer. I know what it's like to feel like no one understands. What it's like to walk in the middle of a crowd and still carry an emptiness that seems to have no name. What it's like to listen to ready-made advice that doesn't reach what really hurts. What it's like to want to scream but can't find the words. And I also know how easy it is to believe that no one would really care, that the world is too busy to notice what's going on inside you. But there's something bigger, someone who sees what no one else sees, who listens to even your longest silences, who understands even the thoughts you try to avoid. And if you feel that God is distant, maybe it's because you were taught to look for him in the noise, when in fact he reveals himself in the depths of your being, in the details, behind the scenes of your soul. You don't need to be strong to be reached. God doesn't wait for you to get ready to love you. He loves you in the now, in the broken, in the confused, in the tired, in the empty. It's in this place where hope seems to have given up that he enters, not to charge you but to welcome you. And I know, sometimes what hurts the most is exactly that, not knowing how to go back. You even want to. You want to feel again. You want to breathe in peace. You want to wake up and not be swallowed by anxiety. You want to sleep and not be haunted by thoughts. But the road seems too long. And inside you, that old question, will I still be able to do it? The answer doesn't come with easy promises, but it comes with presence. The presence of someone who has already been where you are, and of a God who doesn't turn away even when you doubt. It's not easy to walk when your soul is wounded. Everything seems heavier. The days seem longer. Your body obeys, but your heart drags chains. But there is something powerful in not giving up, even when everything inside you asks for silence. There is strength in continuing to breathe, in doing the bare minimum, in allowing yourself to exist even without really understanding why. And if you feel like you're at your limit, maybe that's when a new stage begins. Because it's at the end of human strength that grace begins to act with greater intensity. The healing journey is not made up of leaps. It is made up of small, conscious steps. Sometimes the step of the day is just getting out of bed. Sometimes it is just allowing yourself to feel without judging. Sometimes it is sending a message saying, I need to talk. Sometimes it is just accepting a hug without resisting. Every gesture counts. Every step matters. Because what you are experiencing now may seem like chaos, but over time, it can transform into fertile soil. God does not waste pain. He transforms. He redirects. He rebuilds. And maybe you still don't see it clearly. Maybe everything is still foggy, confusing, without direction. But keep going. Even if you're afraid. Even if you have doubts. Keep going. Because it's not about moving fast. It's about not giving up. You don't need a complete plan. You just need the courage to take the next step. Even if it's small. Even if it's shaky. There's a right time for everything. And your time is not late. It's being shaped. And I'm not saying it will be quick, nor that it will be easy, but I can assure you that it will not be in vain, and above all that you are not alone. Even if everything says otherwise, even if the pain tries to scream louder, even if the darkness seems more real than any light, there is hope, there is a new path, and you can still walk that path even if you are tired, even if you are in disbelief, even if you are in pieces. Because the love that sustains this journey does not depend on your performance. It depends on the truth of who God is. And if you identified with this story, it's because it's yours too. And maybe what you're feeling right now, this mix of relief, pain, and identification, is just the beginning of change. The beginning of a new way of existing, of looking at yourself with more kindness, of accepting that there's still beauty, even in the parts you thought would be ruined forever. Life doesn't have to go back to the way it was. It can be reinvented from who you are today, and that has value. That has power. Healing does not come to erase who you were. It comes to honor who you are becoming. It is not about forgetting the past, but about transforming the way you relate to it. You are not what happened to you. You are what you do with what happened. And if today all you can do is hear these words with a heavy heart, that is already a beginning. That is already a movement. And movement is life. Even if no one else understands, God understands. He saw every tear that you didn't have the strength to let fall. He knows the thoughts that visit you before you fall asleep, and He is still there, in the same place, waiting for His time. He doesn't demand haste, only sincerity, only the courage to not pretend, only the gesture of extending your hand even without knowing what the next step will be. And if you ever find yourself on the verge of giving up, remember this. Even the most tired faith can still be faith. Even the most broken heart can still be healed. And even the darkest days can make way for a new dawn. Your story is not over. It is still being written. And perhaps right now, a new page is opening. With less fear, with more truth, with more presence. Comment here. I'm on this journey too. Because the truth is that, no matter how hard we try, no one can heal alone. Pain, when held in for too long, begins to shape the way we see the world, others, and especially ourselves. And when you live so long hiding behind pain, there comes a time when you forget what it was like to live without it. You even try to protect yourself, close yourself off, isolate yourself. But somewhere inside, there is still a silent desire to be reached, to be remembered, to be welcomed without question. without judgment, just welcomed. That's why the space we're building here is so important, because it's born from reality, from the pain we've gone through, from the faith we've rebuilt, from the courage to keep going even without all the answers. This place wasn't made for perfect people. It was made for those who carry scars, for those who've thought about giving up, for those who've kept quiet for too long, for those who need a space where the truth is more important than appearances. Here, we're not competing to see who's more healed. We're just walking together, step by step, scar by scar. And if you saw yourself in this story, if any part of this account resonated within you, if a memory, a wound, or an old hope came to the surface while you listened, then perhaps this is your moment to say, I'm coming back too, coming back to yourself, coming back to life, coming back to faith, coming back to feeling, coming back to believing that there is still room for you to be who you are, with everything you've lived, with everything you've lost, with everything you've survived. And it doesn't have to be a full-on comeback. It can be a tired, timid, uncertain comeback. It can be a comeback filled with fear. What matters is that you are allowing yourself to try. You are moving, and this movement, however small it may seem, is already a sign of life. It is already a sign that something inside you still beats, still believes, still desires more than simply surviving. You deserve to live, with truth, with depth, with lightness, without having to hide what you feel, without having to justify yourself all the time, without carrying the weight of appearing whole when, in truth, all you wanted was to have permission to be vulnerable. This video is not about an isolated story. It's about us, about all of us who, in some way, hid behind pain and are now learning to come out of hiding. It's about understanding that we are not too broken to start over. It's about recognizing that even in pieces, we are still worthy of love, presence, and a new beginning. And that's why I want to ask you for something simple but profound. If at any point this story spoke to you, write in the comments, I'm coming back too. This phrase carries more than words. It carries decision, courage, confession, and above all, belonging. Because each person who writes this below is saying, I'm trying too. I'm also healing little by little. I'm also relearning how to live. And when we see other voices rising up, when we realize that we're not fighting alone, it changes everything. It brings relief. It strengthens. It builds a network of presence, even without touch, even without hugs, even without physical encounters. Because true presence happens when there is shared truth. And perhaps this is one of the greatest impacts of this journey. Discovering that the pain you thought would isolate you from the world is actually what connects you most sincerely with other people. It's what makes you look with more empathy, listen more attentively, love more deeply. Because those who carry scars learn to respect other people's time. They learn that healing cannot be forced. It must be accompanied. It must be built together. And this mentality changes everything. And you know what else? When you start sharing your story, even if it's little by little, even if you don't know exactly how, you become a beacon. And you don't have to shout or expose yourself beyond what you're ready for. Sometimes just being here, just writing a few words is enough to ignite something in someone who's in the dark. Your return, even if silent, can be the beginning of someone else's return too. That's real impact. That's revelation. That's God working through your vulnerability. So write, not as someone who concludes something, but as someone who begins. Write with your heart, with the part of you that still believes, with the part of you that is coming back. Because yes, we will stumble, you will have difficult days, you will have memories that hurt, but you will also have new beginnings. You will have consolation. You will have presence. You will have peace. And you will take one step at a time, hand in hand with those who understand and without rushing, without pressure, without perfection. Comment here, I'm coming back too. If you've made it this far, truly, thank you. This means that this message touched you somewhere deep down inside. And perhaps it awakened memories, reflections, or even that silence that we learn to keep. This shows that you are also on this journey, searching for meaning, acceptance, direction. And that's exactly why this space exists. For us to talk truthfully, share stories that are often kept too secret, and remember that no one needs to go through certain battles alone. If all this made sense to you, if at some point you thought, this is exactly what I needed to hear today, then subscribe to the channel. This is how we continue this journey together. Because here, each video is designed for those who feel deeply, for those who live intensely, for those who are tired of shallow answers and want true depth. And if you stayed with me until the end, write in the comments, "I'm with you until the end." It will be good to know that you were here until the very last second. And maybe your silent presence is all someone needs to read to have the courage to continue too. Oh, and if this video reached you in any way, leave a like. It's just a click, but it helps this conversation reach further, reaching other people who are also coming back to themselves, one part at a time. There's a video here that complements everything we talked about. Click and continue with me there. The journey is just beginning.